So, anyways, let's jump right into it. Again, this is Adam Delgado, Principal Consultant at North Technology People. He's going to be giving us some awesome advice from the perspective of a Canadian recruiter on how to find a job in Canada. So, Adam, I'm going to hand it over to you. Again, thank you very much for your time and looking forward to hearing it.
Awesome, Josh. Thanks for that. Hello, everybody tuning in from anywhere around the world, ladies and gentlemen. As Josh has mentioned, my name is Adam Delgado. I'm the principal consultant at North Technology People and director. So just to give you some quick context, North Technology People are a tech and digital recruitment agency dedicated to the Canadian markets. And my main specialty, obviously, tech is a huge industry. I focus mainly on the data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and analytics industry. Not to say I haven't recruited weird and wonderful roles. I've kind of got 12 years experience. Started out recruiting in Australia, in Sydney. Then I moved to Singapore and recruited there for a few months. Then I was offered a job in the UK, in London, where I did recruitment for a year. Back to Australia, met my girlfriend, set up in Canada, and have recruited across North America as well. So that's enough about me. Obviously, this is some pictures here about the types of roles that our business recruits for. But what I'm here to do is to share some of my thoughts and experience and tips and tricks about how to land a job. Traditionally, people apply for a job on a job board or with a recruiter, and then you wait. And then the next stage of the process, and then you wait. What I want to do in this conversation is just talk about how to prepare some tips and tricks on the best way to approach this whole process. There's definitely some things you should be doing, and there's certainly some things that I would advise people don't do. And I want to kind of talk through that today. So the first thing I would like to discuss is kind of what to prepare. So you want to have an up-to-date CV, obviously, your LinkedIn profile up to date. If you're a technical person, any GitHub code samples. If you are a creative visual designer or something like that, any work samples or a portfolio, super important to have. What I would also recommend people do as well when you are applying for jobs. So say if you are an architect and you are overseas and you want to migrate to Canada, one of the biggest challenges you will find if you don't have work rights in Canada is that there's sometimes from Canadian employees a reluctance to hire people without work rights. They prefer to hire local people here. Now, obviously, Visto provide a platform for that transition, so super helpful and useful in that regard. But let's say, for example, you are an architect looking for work in Canada. You've just secured your work rights, for example, or again, similarly, even if you don't have work rights, what you should be doing is mapping the market. So this involves Google searching, LinkedIn searching. Who are the top architecting businesses in Canada that you want to work for? Especially now in a COVID climate, it's also worth looking at what particular businesses are doing well. So there's a lot of retailers are doing very, very well. Some e-commerce platforms are doing very, very well. The FMCG, the supply chain is doing quite well at the moment. What industries, kind of are doing well? What industries are growing in that regard? So tech, obviously, always booming and growing. What companies have recently received funding, I've found is a great way to identify, hey, who's gonna want to hire, who is growing at the moment. Personally, myself, I've recently just signed up for Crunchbase. It is a little bit expensive. It's about 380 USD or something like that for a 12-month subscription. But it has some it's some of the most detailed data, company data I've ever seen. It goes into detail as to who's got funding, when they got funding, who the directors are, who their investors are, information about their business, and they got LinkedIn links and all that type of stuff. So super useful in that regard. And yeah, so looking at again at what companies are hiring, who hires people like me. So again, kind of mapping out the market, doing LinkedIn search is a great way that recruiters, or good recruiters, I should say, will kind of map the market. Is called CV stripping. So you go onto a LinkedIn page, you find, say I'm a doctor. Let's say, for example, I'm a doctor looking to migrate to Canada. I don't have work rights in this instance. Let's map out the market on LinkedIn. Medical professional, if I am in some type of cardiovascular specialty. So, doctor plus cardiovascular in a LinkedIn search. And then it's going to have all the list of doctors and medical professionals who work for those types of businesses. Those companies hire these types of doctors and in turn will probably hire people like yourself. So that's a little kind of cheeky way to kind of map the market. So what's the current job market paying? I think this is a really important factor when looking for work. Obviously, when I recently migrated to Canada myself, I came here on a work visa from Australia. I had 2 years unrestricted work rights in Canada, but I definitely wasn't confident about the types of salaries that the market was paying because I hadn't really investigated that. So one good way to do that, again, just internet Google searching, salaries for database engineers, salaries for data scientists, or health professionals, or you just really want to be doing research. I think information is power in a job search. So the more information and knowledge you have about the industry, the types of roles, the competitors, who's hiring in this space, all really, really valuable information for you. And similarly at interview, it's going to be a valuable talking point to the interviewer to say, oh yeah, look, I saw that XYZ companies are growing and they're hiring a lot of people. Are you facing that? Are you finding out what challenges are facing this particular industry? So say I recruit a lot in the artificial intelligence space, and people are talking about ethical AI and the use of kind of company and personal data of the people they're working with. So asking questions around, hey, how do XYZ company deal with the topic of ethical AI? And again, it gives you some good talking points there. A really valuable point that I would advise people when migrating to Canada, whether you have work rights or you do not have work rights. So everybody knows that Toronto is the biggest city in Canada. It has the most companies hiring, yes, for sure. It also has the most densely populated areas. And most people who move to Canada will move to Toronto. So the competition for job roles in Toronto is going to be a lot higher comparatively to Newfoundland or Halifax or Winnipeg, or I haven't done too much research into Saskatchewan cities, but those types of less densely populated areas, I think is probably the best strategy. If everybody's doing this and you're doing this, there might be 1,000 people who have recently migrated to Canada this quarter for software engineering roles in Toronto. But hey, what about in Halifax or Newfoundland? If nobody's checked out Newfoundland, I went there on a holiday. Beautiful part of Atlantic Canada, smaller population, but there's still IT companies there. There's still universities there. There's still hospitals there. So they still have a lot of infrastructure. It's just not maybe the big city, the Toronto lifestyle that everybody is looking for. And again, that will depend on each person's preference. If you only can move to Toronto because you have some family or friends here that they're going to be working, to kind of put you up as you find a job search or land a position, that's fine. But I would advise, don't just focus on the Toronto market for applying for jobs. Search across Canada, because ultimately the first job, landing your first job in Canada, is probably going to be the hardest job that you find in your career in kind of as speaking from my own experience again as a migrant and now a Canadian permanent resident. It was challenging. I did have to just get it's a different culture, even for an Aussie coming to Canada. Business is done a little bit differently. The people's morals and attitudes and ethics are slightly different. Not saying it in a good or bad way. It's just a matter of a fact that they're just different to how we kind of approach things. So that's around mapping the market. Definitely advise people do that. So
Yeah,
jumping on to,
can I just jump in for 1 second, Adam? I just want to
please.
make two highlights because I think that was an amazing slide. Number one is probably not enough of our users and all immigrants are mapping the market, which is extremely important for those submitting dozens, sometimes hundreds of applications and then worrying why they're not hearing back, right? Take the time up front, do that research like Adam said, and you're better off submitting fewer applications to companies that are actually good fits and actually hiring. Like you said, scope the ones that are hiring or have the money to hire. And then secondly, not enough people. It's a great point, the last one that you said, to target the less densely populated areas. Number one, there's less competition. Number two, I've heard firsthand from companies that are outside of the major, metropolises, and they really struggle to find and keep staff. So look to those little, the smaller companies and smaller cities. Even if you have to go work there for 6, 12 months, get that Canadian work experience. That'll make finding your second job that much better. Just wanted to highlight those because I thought they were great, and I'm going to pass it back to you, Adam.
Yeah, no sweat, Josh. Yeah, totally. It's I mean, even looking in Toronto, there's a number of smaller kind of towns and cities outside of Toronto that are, massively Canada short. Kitchener, Waterloo. You have the London region as well, which is somewhere where I've recruited a little bit. So yeah, obviously, any questions about these, we can chat more at the end with the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So this is around kind of landing an interview. So as we kind of mentioned, make a list of the companies that you apply to. I really, really recommend people doing this. So you kind of have your list of your target clients that you want to work for, and then off them, you're saying, hey, cool, look, in an Excel spreadsheet, hey, cool, I applied to XCOM and I applied to Bluecom or whatever, and then have a link or a copy of the job description. And then, if, again, I think finding a job, you have to be willing to go the extra mile. If there's 1,000 candidates that have all applied for a job role, that's fine. And that's the first step of the process. But who's taking that extra initiative? Who's going to follow up with the recruitment manager on LinkedIn after 2 weeks, after they haven't heard back anything? All it takes is as you said, once you have the company name you applied for, jump on LinkedIn for a second, and every company you've applied for, connect with their recruitment manager, or if you know who the hiring manager is, connect with the hiring manager. Quick LinkedIn introduction. Hey there, Jeff, just applied for the role a couple of weeks ago, really keen and interested to explore my application in more detail. When you are interviewing, one of the first questions, if it hasn't been made apparent that if you are out of the country or if you do not have work rights, the first question you should be asking is, does your company provide sponsorship? If you are out of Canada and you do not have work rights, finding companies that are open to sponsorship or who have previously sponsored people is going to be the most valuable information you can find, because all you get on Indeed or LinkedIn is just a list of hundreds of companies who are hiring. Some of them may say only taking applicants from who have work rights. So this is certainly something to kind of keep in mind. So yeah, look, following up, making a list, certainly valuable. As I said, yeah, follow up 2 weeks after the application. And similarly, if you've had the interview, you get a first stage phone interview, Google Hangout, whatever it is. Connect with them after and say, hey, look, really keen to assess your feedback. How did I get on? And really use that feedback, and don't take it as offense. If somebody says, slow down your speed of speech, or ask more questions, or don't say that, don't take it as an attack on you personally. It's constructive criticism. Personally, myself, I've had this attitude throughout my whole career. If I can learn from somebody who is smarter than me or in a different area than me, or who can share a story or experience that's going to help my life, or help me learn something, I don't have to learn that myself. Somebody's telling me, hey, this is really valuable information, so I can just store it away and be like, hey, cool, next time I'm in that situation, I want to use that. I think on the point of landing interviews, sometimes it's tough. I always liken it to a bit of a first date scenario. Everybody's dressed nice, on their best behavior. They don't want to say anything too bad. They might have some information about themselves or their work history that, I don't want to say that right away. It's not the best thing to say at a first interview. So you want to be setting the best first impression at interview, and there's a few other slides here about interview preparation, which we'll jump on, but this is around more kind of landing the interview. So applying, mapping the market, following up, connecting with hiring managers, interviewing in country versus overseas. Now, this is something that I encounter frequently. Mr. or Mrs. Candidate X applies for a job role that I've advertised, and they look really, really great for the role. And I connect with them and say, hey, Jane or Jeff, really great to connect with you. Love to talk to you about this position. And then we have a conversation, and I find out that they are overseas and that they don't have work, or they, more interestingly, they do have work rights. They're in the process of securing their permanent residency, but they are out of country. Personal preference completely. My personal and professional advice would be, if you are out of the country, say we have two identical candidates here, John and Jeff, from, say, somebody's from South America and somebody is from Asia, and that they both applied for the same job role. They both have work rights. They're both very experienced for the role, but one person is in Canada. The chap from South America, he's in Canada, and the other chap from Asia is still in Asia. Both very good profiles. The preference for the hiring manager is always, I don't want to say always, because, and again, this is just a purely opinion piece by Adam, but I would certainly say that the preference is going to be to the local candidate who is in the country with work experience. Now, I can understand for somebody migrating to a country, if you have your work rights, the time you spend on the ground in the country without a job is money that's kind of burning a hole in your pocket. So I completely empathize with that. I would just say the chances of you securing a job role increase exponentially when you have work rights and you're in the country, and you're applying for those jobs. So when those things start to not be the case, it does become more challenging to find companies that are willing to hire you outside of Canada without work rights.
Adam,
But
do you think that's changing at all, or even just a little bit due to COVID and this kind of work from home approach? Like, are some companies even more willing to consider remote work from outside of the country?
Yes, I would definitely say that. With COVID, we're in a changing economy. So companies that have traditionally said no to work from home are now being forced to implement the infrastructure and technologies to support that type of work culture. I think it's going to be very, very interesting this back end of 2020. Now that things are slowly starting to open back up now, and these restrictions are rolling back, I'm personally very interested to see how the Canadian community, essentially, and the workforce, now we've changed. Pre-COVID, everybody was in the office 9 to 5. COVID, bad weather economy, everybody's working from home. Now we're going to go to post-COVID, and then all these employers say, right, everybody back into the office. No thanks, boss. I'm more productive at home. I don't have to travel every day. I get to spend more time with my family. I'm happier. I get more time to work out. So I
No
don't.
commute.
Yeah, no commute. Totally.
I'm just backing away to grab my mug here, folks.
Yeah, far away. Yeah. So look, it's I think. Yeah, it's certainly changing. There are some slides that I have a little further that talk specifically about
Awesome.
those type of companies that have a network of people who are overseas or who are working remote, and there's a network and a pool of candidates that companies can go to hire. So again, this is a bit further in the slide and presentation, but that is certainly something that we can discuss. So that's
Awesome.
interviewing in country and overseas, and be willing to do what it takes. My personal style when I'm kind of approaching my business and the way I do my work, I'm very go-getter. I'm going to get after it. I'm going to have those conversations. I'm going to get knocked back. But I also run a pretty successful recruitment business. So it also, you have to be willing to put yourself out there, to make the connections, to make the calls, to go further than beyond just that. Oh, yep, click the apply button, attach the CV and send. That's cool. Everybody's doing that. This conversation is about how to increase your chances outside of just the apply and click.
Awesome.
Cool. So, all right, interview tips. This is something that I spend a lot of time on. So every candidate I work with, I want to help everybody get a job. If I could get 1,000 people a job tomorrow, my billings are going to be great, and I'm going to feel very satisfied. And at the end of the day, I'm helping the economy, helping people. So this advice is not something that I've just made up myself. This is advice that I've picked up over a decade of working in recruitment. It's been a mixture of hiring managers. It's been a mixture of other recruiters, things that I've learned from stuff. At interview, your first date, you only get one chance at a first impression, and I truly believe that is magnified even at an interview process. You can have the best interview in the world, and then if you say one thing that tips the hiring manager's mind to think, oh, actually that wasn't the greatest response, that could be the reason that you're not hired. And it's super trivial. At the end of the day, I don't make hiring decisions for my clients. That's purely on their end. But as I said, one little thing, and I've heard it hundreds of times, can really blow the chances. So you want to be saying, what I tell my candidates, less is more. And that totally is contrary to what you'd think is going to be the most successful interview, where you're just firing, oh, I do this, I do that, I'm really good at this, I'm really good at that. We want to structure the interview. Traditional interviews, it's like a parent and a child relationship. It's questions and answers, and questions and responses, and what did you do, and an example. In that type of dialogue, completely cool. We'll talk about breaking that format later. But if we are question, answer, the best response that you can answer questions to is the CAR acronym. It's also referred to as the STAR acronym. I like CAR because it's shorter: circumstance, action, and result. I'll give an example just relating to recruitment, and it's kind of salesy, and I'm sure everybody will be able to pick it up as opposed to a technical CAR response. But say I'm interviewing for a job role as a recruitment consultant, and somebody asks me, Adam, tell me about a time you've had to develop new business. Now, this type of question is a behavioral question, asking about my behaviors, and a competency question. So, tell me about a time you've had to bring on new sales. I'm going to use the CAR acronym. So the first part is circumstance. Adam, tell me about a time you've had to win new business. Well, Mr. Client, the circumstance was working at North Technology People as a principal consultant. Starting my business, I was very, very focused on new business. So that's kind of setting out the outline, the circumstance of where I'm going to achieve. So the action. So circumstance, action. So the actions that I took on a day-to-day basis to achieve my new business accounts and generating sales. With that, I mapped the market. I introduced myself to 100 new prospects every month. And I was, pushing for meetings and sending this type of information and blah, blah, blah. And then the result of my 100 business development outreaches per month is that I actually exceeded my target for the quarter of whatever Q3 by 25%. And I ended up bringing on 3 new clients above my target of 4 for the quarter. So breaking it down into the circumstance, the action that I took, you'll notice that I'm not talking about my team targets. It's not talking about what the business did. They want to know what Adam Delgado did in a capacity of new business and recruitment sales. I did this, I did that. And the R, it shows that you understand the question and how it relates to business needs and implications. So the end result was that I actually exceeded my target, and I got a salesman of the quarter or whatever. So CAR acronym, super handy. You can literally say circumstance was the actions I took and the end result. And what this does, what people often find at interview, is that if you get a question, tell me a little bit about yourself, that's an icebreaker question. They're just doing that to open the dialogue. You know what I mean? It's the small talk of an interview question. Tell me a little about yourself. What do you do? What people often find, if they don't structure their responses and answers at interview, they're kind of just making it up as they go, and people sometimes lose track of thought, and it's like, oh, wow. And they have to kind of circle back. So, sorry there, Bob. What was the question? Doesn't look too great. You're given a super straightforward question, and this kind of leads on to the next part. Answer questions concisely. Less is more. If somebody's asking you, I'm just going to use a technical example here. If somebody asks you about working with a JavaScript framework or whatever, or somebody asks you about dealing with difficult stakeholders, they don't want to know anything else aside from JavaScript frameworks or stakeholder management. So answer your question specifically to that. And I often find that even I ask when I'm interviewing my candidates, hey Bob, tell me about a time you've had to code in PHP or whatever it may be, and they kind of start off with that, and then they just peel off and start talking about the salary expectations or why they're looking for a new role. And that is as somebody who's interviewed thousands of people, it's not constructive. It's not. I ask you a question, and the reason that I'm asking questions is to qualify something. And if the response that you're giving me doesn't qualify the answer, what I do is I kind of stop. So I say, okay, cool, I appreciate that, but let's kind of pull it back to the other question. People who aren't as experienced or don't know how to really probe deep and get past that surface level smoke of a response, if they don't really dive down, they're just going to say no. They're just going to, no, you didn't answer my question. Or they're just going to, PHP coding, you talked about salary expectations, you didn't answer my question, therefore you're not qualified, therefore you don't get the job. So again, less is more. Use the least amount of words to reply to the response. Now, again, that sounds weird because you want to be selling yourself, and definitely you want to, but less is more. Trust me on that. Stay on topic too kind of ties into that. So if you guys are or girls are talking about project management issues or stakeholder management or motivations or career goals, really stay on that topic. And this is kind of these next two, engage with the interviewer in a conversational tone, breaking the Q&A format. So as I mentioned before, question, answer is super standard interview format. If you're a technical person or a doctor or an engineer or an accountant or something like that, if you can break that format and get into a adult level conversation, a constructive conversation about the job role and the business and the challenges, I guarantee you're going to feel better about the interview, and the person interviewing you is going to feel better about your candidacy for the role, because you were talking, you were two humans engaging and talking about a job role. And secret tip to everybody, and this, take it or leave it, people like them. So if I am a scientist and I'm meeting other scientists, hey, cool, there's something we can talk about. We have that in common. It's a tricky one. I often liken an interview to a game of poker. You know what I mean? You really want to play your hand. If you can see the interviewer is engaging with you about cricket or like hockey or something like that, roll that, keep on that. You know what I mean? You want to build a relationship with this person, and it's up to them to kind of steer it in the right direction as well. That's just more about kind of people to people management, I guess you could say, and what people like and what people respond to. In sales, it's a saying: people like them, and if you can make people like you and engage with you, there's more of a chance they're going to buy from you at the end of the day. So whether or not that's the right way to go about it, it's just human nature. So breaking that format, super valuable strategy. Salary question. All the time I ask this question to candidates: Joe, Jane, Bob, whatever, what are your salary expectations? And sometimes I get a few responses. Sometimes it's most of the time it's a range. Oh, Adam, I'm looking for 70 to 100K. Or Adam, I don't really know what my salary expectations are. The best way to answer this question, there's a couple of ways. You can go kind of push back and say to the candidate, say, Josh, what are your salary expectations for this role? Josh could turn around and say, well, what do you typically pay someone in your company at this level of role? So I'm a senior networking engineer. What do you generally pay senior networking engineers? So I'm looking for a range of that, which is cool and fine, and that's a better way to answer the question. The worst way is when you give a range. You say 70 to 100K. Now let's say you're on 60,000 and you're underpaid. which is another topic we can talk about, where this Canadian salary it's all over the shop. But specifically, you want to give one number, and you do not want to justify it, and you do not want to tell them about your current salary, and you do not want to tell them what your friend's making at a competitor. Adam, what are your salary expectations? Mr. Klein, Mrs. Klein, I'm looking for a salary of $75,000. I'm available to start in 2 weeks' notice. That's it. Yeah.
It also follows the less is more.
Totally. Yeah. They're not, and you find too, when people try to describe things and justify things, again, you think it sounds good, but it doesn't. It sounds like shaky, like, oh, is he really looking for 75? Or and when you give a range traditionally, so if I tell my company, hey, yeah, look, I'm looking for a range 75 to 100,000, we get to offer stage, CEO signs off on the offer. What number do you think is going to be on the job offer? Do you think it's going to be $100,000, or do you think it's going to be $75,000? Again, not all the time, but most of the time it's going to be the lower number, because why wouldn't the employer want to save themselves $25,000 on hiring someone? Unless you're getting into like some super niche tech stuff and salary is the only way that a company can attract a person. Is like, oh, you're on 100. Well, we really need to hire you, so we're going to give you 150,000. And it's like, all right, you bought me. Cool, I'll sign. Let's go. So that's the salary advice. Just give one number, don't justify it, and use exactly that kind of framework. Mr. Candidate, Mrs. Klein, I'm looking for X salary, and I'm available to start in blah, 2 weeks notice, 1 month notice, whatever. So again, on some prep stuff, be prepared. So what I would recommend, and what I actually did for my own job search in Canada, when I got here, before I started applying, I wrote down a few questions. I'm like, and I thought about it for half an hour, drinking a tea or a coffee or whatever. What are some of my biggest career achievements? What are some of my biggest career challenges? Where is sometimes that I've had to deal with difficult stakeholders? What am I looking for in my career? What are my professional and personal and financial goals? What motivates me? What am I inspired by? You might not get these questions. Chances are at some stage, I mean, and one thing I will say about interviewers as well, nobody is trained on how to interview people. Like, it's not like a hiring manager of an engineering team of 50 at Shopify has sat down for 2 days and done an induction of, this is how you interview people. So it's very much trial and error. People are like using Google searches and top 25 interview questions for iOS developer or for networking engineer or doctor. So you want to be prepared for those most common questions, challenges, problems, motivations, salary expectations, all super common, and just write down on a sheet of paper, a couple of achievements and challenges. So when you do get the question, oh yeah, great, my best achievement was back when I was at blah blah blah, and I brought on this account and it ballooned out as 150K account a year and blah blah blah. So those types of things, being prepared, super valuable and super good advice. Alrighty, so again, kind of off the back of preparation, this is more at interview. So when you're in the interview, I tell my candidates, it's a bit of a cheesy line, put your consultant hat on. What that means exactly is, and I tell my candidates, don't picture yourself as Joe or Jane interviewing for an engineer or an architect or a doctor or a maintenance worker, whatever it is. Put your consultant hat on and ask them, what does the company need? So I've got some really awesome questions that I've listed here that I would recommend literally every single person at every single interview you have for the rest of your life. Ask these questions, please, because it forces the interviewer to talk about the role, the responsibilities and duties and tasks, and you'd actually be quite surprised at a first stage interview how, as I said, nobody gets training on interview unless they have like an actual recruitment process, and each step is they're qualifying this and blah blah blah. People sometimes don't think to ask that. It's like, oh, I've got all this other information, that's fine. So ask, what does the company need? Why are they hiring for this position? What have I done that aligns with that need? So the way to start off this consultant hat strategy is exactly this question. Mr. Client, Mrs. Client, if I was successful in securing this role, what will be the first tasks and projects you assign to me? Now that forces them to tell you what the job is going to be doing. Oh yeah, Adam, well, as a software developer, you'll be migrating our existing code base to our new code base. If it's, let's just say it's iOS, so Objective-C to a newer version of Swift. And then you're going to, when we have our Swift application rewritten and migrated, you're going to be adding these existing features and products. One of our new products that we're implementing is actually a video camera, blah, blah, blah. So that they've answered your question. Perfect opportunity for you to put the consultant hat on and sell yourself. Oh, really? You're talking about doing an Objective-C to Swift migration? I actually did that 2 years ago when I was working at blah, blah, blah company. One of the challenges I faced when I was migrating Swift to Objective-C to Swift was XYZ problem. Have you guys noticed that problem, or how did you avoid that issue? And now this question breaks that question answer mold, because you guys are conversational now. What problems did you guys have? As soon as you're kind of turning the question back and they're answering, it's kind of a game of ping pong now. Like, you're kind of talking about the role and your experience, and as I said, it's more conversational. So if I'm successful in the role, what are the first tasks and projects you assign to me? A winner at every interview. Another question, really useful as well. Tell me what the current team is working on. What are your current developers doing? What are the current construction workers working on? What projects have you got forecast for the next 3 to 6 months that I might be involved in? Oh yeah, well, we're building a new skyscraper down at Front Street and Bloor there, and blah blah blah, and it's a government building and this and that. And you say, okay, look, I've built some government buildings before, and I found that some challenges that we faced were getting approvals and blah blah blah. How are you overcoming those types of challenges and problems? Again, so what's one of the biggest challenges facing our industry? Really great talking point for if I'm interviewing for a recruitment role, which I was doing earlier this year before I founded the business. I was kind of asking interviewers, say, look, what do you guys think about this whole emergence of these Fiverr and Communo and these websites that kind of aggregate talent that people can hire remotely? It kind of is a bit of a challenge for the recruitment industry here. It is a challenge, that's depending how much of a challenge, you can argue that. But simply the discussion of raising a challenge that's facing the industry, most people aren't going to talk about that at an interview, and it really builds your credibility as a professional and not just somebody applying for a job. It's like, yeah, I'm entrenched in this industry. I'd advise people to really immerse yourself in your industry. Like, I'm a recruiter, yes. I am immersing myself in the artificial intelligence, machine learning, data science, analytics industry. I'm on Crunchbase. I've subscribed. I'm attending conferences, meetup. I've got my meetup group. I'm really obsessed about this industry, and I want to be a subject matter expert. I don't usually like the word expert, but that's what your goal should be in your industry. Own it, know what's happening, and talk about that at an interview, because as I said, it's super credible. So what are 3 things you need to see in a successful hire? Okay, so this is at interview. But sometimes it's a bit of a hit or miss. You generally should ask this question when you know you're qualified for the role. If you're kind of maybe 50-50 on the role and you've just applied and you've somehow landed the interview, maybe this isn't the greatest question to highlight maybe some of the experience you don't have. It's a question that I ask my clients when I'm actually taking a job brief for the role. Joe, Jane, what are 3 key things you look for on a CV to qualify if this person is going to be a successful hire or considered for interview? And I literally write those 3 things down. Are you looking for a CCIE network engineer that's worked in government at an architecture level? Cool. That's the kind of the brief, isn't it? You want this person to do that with that experience, blah, blah, blah. So you could ask that interview, look, what are 3 key things you need to see from a successful hire? What are 3 key things that your network engineers have had in common? Again, very valuable and useful question.
Adam, we have a quick question that's actually directly related to something you just said, which was, if your roles or skills may not perfectly fit the description, Krishna has a question, which is, if you're in that situation, right? You might be a half decent fit, but maybe you're only partially matching the roles and skills. Mm-hmm. What do you recommend that a candidate say if the employer kind of brings that up? Or what's a good way to kind of address that?
Yeah, so I would say it depends on the seniority of the role. If a company has said, say they're looking for a DevOps engineer, which one of my clients I recently just placed, they very much needed experience with Redis clusters. Now, we needed that essentially because the first part of the job was setting up Redis clusters across multiple data centers. The candidates that I was interviewing, it was the first question I asked: "Hey, Joe, Jane, Jeff, have you got experience working with Redis clusters? Yay or nay?" For those candidates that didn't have the experience, they looked awesome on paper, and these weren't bad DevOps engineers by any stretch. They just didn't have the experience that was essentially required for our DevOps role. That's not to say other DevOps companies wouldn't hire them. To answer the question there, look, it's tough. If you land the interview and you have highlighted that you do not have experience there's obviously some interest. So I would talk about maybe before, if you know this going into the interview and you know that they've considered you and that you have landed the interview, and they know that, say it's this Redis cluster example, if I don't have it but I've landed the interview, I should be spending the days and weeks in preparation for the interview learning as much as I can. Fake it till you make it. Yeah. You obviously, if they ask you, do you have any commercial experience with building Redis clusters in data centers globally, internationally? I don't have any commercial experience, Mr. Client, Mrs. Client, but in preparation for this interview, I've actually done a lot of self-study and learning, and I'd love the chance to share some of that knowledge with you today, and get your feedback, and maybe you can teach me a little bit more. So it's like, cool, I don't have the experience, but let's go, test me. What do I know and what don't I know? And then if you're finding, oh, look, I haven't actually worked with that. Oh, no, I don't know how to do that part with the Redis clusters. Well, hey, at least you've put yourself out there. At least you've been self-learning and self-studying. And you're showing the initiative. You know what I mean? Most people, I don't know it. I don't know. I can't work with that. Sorry. That's cool and that's fine, and that's an honest answer. But it's now how you're engaging with that problem or challenge. Look, I don't actually have experience with Redis clusters, but I have been self-teaching myself. This happens a lot in coding and development as well. People have side projects. If you are a developer, do some side project work, and this will kind of pop onto to another slide that we have. So hopefully that answers the question we had there.
Yeah, thanks for that, Krishna. And if anybody else has, feel free to throw them in the chat as well.
Awesome, cool. We've done that slide. Okay, cool. So this next section is what you can kind of do. So you've applied for a few roles. I'm not in Canada. I'm in Australia. I want to move to Canada. I've got my process in with Josh at Visto. Hopefully my PRs are going to land in a couple of months. Now let's start. What can I do in the meantime? I've applied for a bunch of roles. These recruitment competitor websites, I use some of them for my own website on Fiverr. I outsource the development of my website to this little studio in Bosnia and Herzegovina. They did a really great price for it, and it's work. You know what I mean? If you're out of work or you're kind of in between jobs, keep busy. You know what I mean? Do some volunteer work. I mean, look, volunteer work is super admirable, and I take my hat off to everybody who's volunteers and people who are, going above and beyond to help humanity in these problems with COVID. Awesome. They deserve medals for sure. Trying to kind of stay active when it is in downtime. Again, it shows that you're not just willing to kind of just sit on the couch and be like, oh, I'm out of work now, so I'm just, oh, what did you do for 3 months? Oh, nothing. I was just looking for work. Again, nothing wrong with that. It's tough and challenging. You might be traveling, seeing family, whatever. What did you do for the last 3 months? Well, I actually was working with a couple of friends. We were toying around the idea with this technology product. So we kind of founded a little business. It's something we're working on the side. It's something that I'm interested in, but I am still looking for a full-time role, 40 hours a week to kind of do that and kind of earn some income. So that, again, it just shows that you're hungry and you're tenacious and that you're engaged. So Fiverr is one option if you are a designer. I think they've even opened up the categories of professionals.
You can do anything on Fiverr now, yeah. Like almost anything you can think of, you can sign up for.
Yeah. So, I mean, super useful, valuable. Whack it on your LinkedIn. Yeah, cool. Here's a couple of the projects I worked on. Communo is a similar platform to Fiverr, Canadian-owned business. Shout out to Communo. I shook hands with one of their VPs a few months ago. Really cool brand, team. They do a very similar thing. So they've got a network of, say, thousands of Canadian working professionals, and you can go and hire them directly. So again, sort of a competitor or recruitment agency. Do some freelance work. Try and do a startup. I think with so many people being out of work, you might have an idea that's kind of been plaguing. I'm like, oh, I got this really cool idea for a software or a product, or you've got plenty of time. You're out of work, you're looking for work. Engage with the community, get on LinkedIn, shoot out a couple of invitations, have these conversations. So even if nothing comes of it, you get the question, oh, you were out of work for 6 months, what were you doing in that 6 months? Oh, well, you know what, I actually reached out to a bunch of people on LinkedIn. I was trying to put a startup together. If it's related to the industry of the company you're applying for, you're a construction worker applying for construction jobs. Oh yeah, look, I got together with a software developer and a UX designer, and for the last 6 months I've kind of been toying around with this AI construction tech product. Wow, you're hungry, you're tenacious, you're showing that you're engaged, and you want to be involved in bettering yourself. So and especially with a lot of people being out of work now, I think there's a lot of people looking to stay busy and stay active. And I think startup, hopefully what some of the things that come from COVID are some really cool startups, because some people are out of work. Again, volunteer work, maybe not super sexy as doing a startup, but it shows your colors, doesn't it? I think in this COVID climate, we've seen really, really bad things happen. People have done things that are, people are saying is bad. And then you have people who are just, you see stories about this guy's taking out $1,000 and handing $100 notes to people in unemployment lines. You know what I mean? That type of feel good volunteer work really goes a long way, especially if you're like applying in the not-for-profit scene. Again, it's another kind of weird little industry that doesn't get a lot of attention, and not a lot of money's thrown at it. But if you're looking for work in the not-for-profit sector and you're doing volunteer work for Amnesty or whoever it may be, they're going to look really favorably upon that. And the remote trial thing. So if you are overseas, you don't have work rights, you can kind of offer and say, look, I don't have the experience, or I do have the experience, I don't have the work rights. Would you consider me doing a remote trial for 2 to 3 weeks? Say, look, give me the work. I'm going to volunteer myself and my time for 2 to 3 weeks. You give me some work to do. So it's kind of like a coding test or a challenge, but you're actually working and engaging with them. And if you can show value and that you're a hard worker, and a company's been struggling to fill a position, like, they may be more inclined to consider a sponsorship option, and bring you over internationally, if you're showing them that it can work and you're giving them reasons to hire you.
These are great, Adam. If I could make a quick plug, we actually
Please.
had some of these ideas with Visto, and for all of you that are watching, you're members of Visto. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to join us live here. But if you go into the portal under forums, we have a section called Visto Projects, where we're trying to foster some of these startups or volunteer work. I've even posted a few areas where we could even use some help on. And I've spoken to a few users. Even just having guest blogs written for the website can kind of highlight your profile and get your name out there. So I definitely recommend checking out the Visto forum. I haven't done a good enough job promoting it, to be honest, but if you guys are looking for either volunteer work or finding other people within the community to work together with on like a startup idea, definitely check it out. And Adam, I do have to say I have to run in 11 minutes.
Okay, cool.
So
that's cool.
I won't take any more of your time.
No, that's cool, mate. We'll speed through the rest of this. Oh, wow, that's it. Okay, cool.
Wow, perfect timing.
Yeah,
we actually
cool.
didn't plan that either.
No, totally not. So, yeah, look, I think that's pretty much it from me for now. Just to kind of recap, be engaged, immerse yourself in the industry, ask questions, go do what everybody else isn't doing. If everybody's doing this, what else can I do? How else can I engage with the community? So yeah, ladies and gents, that's it from me. Hope that information has been valuable and useful, and it you can use some of it to enhance your job search. Here are my socials and details as well. You can check me out at northtechnologypeople.ca. It's got a link to our email address, and my personal LinkedIn. If you want to connect or ask questions, I'm happy to help anybody as and where I can.
Awesome. Well, really quickly, I want to say we are going to stick around for another 10 minutes for a live Q&A. If anybody still has some questions, we still have some We still have some viewers kicking around, which is awesome. Hopefully you guys found Adam's presentation useful. I will also be taking the video with Adam's permission and posting it in the portal so that it can live on forever and help many more Visto users. Adam, also just want to say thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate the content. I think a lot of what you preached and learned here or taught us here is in line with our approach to this content, which is finding a job, especially from outside of the country, especially with no work status, is extremely difficult. And exactly like you said, you're going to have to go a little bit above and beyond to get it done. And this is the type of content that will help people do it. So thank you very much for that, Adam.